Welcome to Brighter Morning with Bhoe on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and U97.5 Hot Like Pepper Radio. We're glad to have you on board this morning. We have some wonderful guests for you. Some are from Britain. We will talk to them. They are linked to universities over there. And we also have lecturer at the University of the West Indies in economics, Mr. Dr. Valmiki Arjun. So we have a good lineup for you. I hope you had a good weekend. This was Emancipation Weekend, Emancipation Day, of course, on August 1st. We had the head of the Emancipation Committee on Friday last week talking about emancipation and how COVID had changed all of it. A lot of it is on technology, online, with participation, but also that gave them the springboard, the jumping board to make whatever they were doing in Trinidad and Tobago available to anyone who wanted to see abroad. A lot of people spent this weekend under state of emergency conditions and under regular curfew conditions, and they were very limited in their activities because of the options available and so on. So we will see how this goes later in the week. I just want to mention one news item that Chanel Al-Suran focused on, and that was the statement by the president of Guyana talking about relations with Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, the one thing we don't want is to have conflict among the countries of CARICOM. CARICOM is one of the oldest united bodies of countries coming together for a common purpose. And while we may have whatever differences, the place to do that is to talk it through in the various forums. And I imagine prime ministers and presidents talk to each other one-on-one on the telephone and other forms of communication. And we can resolve all of those issues. I want to say something about Guyana. Guyana went through a very rough time. Over many years, we had a situation there that was really horrible. Under President Burnham, who was a very repressive president of Guyana. And following that, they had many years of struggle because of international challenges, etc. And they were able to develop their country and to do things that were in their control, like develop agriculture, develop mining, deal with forestry, issues like that. Guyana is one of these countries that are water rich. They have a tremendous amount of water because of the rivers, the very huge rivers and the waterfalls. I want to mention that Guyana is also a country the size of England. It is not a small country. It's a very vast country and as I said, it's water rich, it's forest rich. It has a border with Brazil, which they are now opening up with a road. There are about 40,000 Venezuelan migrants there who have basically been welcomed to Guyana. And they have a small population, about 600,000 people, or less than half the population of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is something that we should be aware of, and they have found oil. And I read, I think yesterday, where Exxon indicated that they had made another find, quite significant. So, you know, it's a country you want to do well with, you want to collaborate with, as we do with all CARICOM countries. And it doesn't make sense for us to be quarreling with one another. We've had little spats with Barbados from time to time. We'd have little spats with Jamaica. And we have a little spat now with Guyana. I think these things should be just left behind. And we should embrace each other as Caribbean people. We have a lot to do. It is a hard time. This COVID is not easy. I note the position of the Guyanese president on vaccines, and this is a sore point. This business of maldistribution of vaccines in the world is going to create a lag between industrialized countries and emerging or developing countries, and we need to watch that. It's a serious issue. And it also has implications for the whole movement of people and the migration process. I think I want to write something about that this Thursday. I usually write in The Guardian on Thursday. And maybe I will write something about that because it is a disturbing feature. And it's a situation in which decisions by the industrialized world are going to affect very adversely economically, not to mention the health implications, the illness implication, the infection implications, the death implications. They are going to severely affect countries that are developing or emerging throughout the world. This morning, we have three very important guests from Britain. The first one is Dr. Nicole Ferdinand. She is a senior lecturer at Oxford Brookes University in events management, and she is at the business school there. And we have Dr. John Bustard, who is at the University of Ulster in Ireland, and we are going to talk to him as well. And we have Dr. Nigel Williams, who is at the University of Portsmouth. He's a reader there. And we are going to talk to all three of them about a very important issue. This threesome, the three people we're going to talk to now, are a team, they are a research team working on the ethical use of technology in international festivals and events. And you're going to see how that develops as we go about our conversation. So this is a conversation in which we are going to explore what is happening in England and the other countries connected with England, Scotland, Wales, the Ireland, of course, and some of the things that are happening there around sport as an event. We're going to focus a little bit on the finals, the European finals between England and Italy, which Italy won, and we'll see how the conversation develops. But you have three very able people and very good researchers, and we are going to see how this develops in our conversation. Could we welcome them, please? Good morning. Nicole, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well.
All right, Dr. Ferdinand, Nicole, and we have Dr. John Bustard. Good morning to you, sir. Can you hear me? I don't think he's hearing me. Is he hearing me? And we have Dr. Nigel Williams from Portsmouth. Are you hearing us?
I'm hearing you. Good day.
Morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Dr. Bustard, is he hearing? Are we connected with him? Okay. Well, we had an incident over the finals between England and Italy. We had a game that was very hard fought, made the entire time, and went into a penalty shootout in order to resolve it. And it evoked some strong feelings. But before we get into that, I want to ask the question, why are feelings in sport so strong in England? And is that true all over England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales? And why do fans identify so strongly with clubs like Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United? Is there an identity need that is involved here? So I just want you to talk very freely. I know that you are researchers on the technology side of this, but sports is an important thing and you live there. So can I have your perspective on that? Dr. Ferdinand,
I'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can start with this particular question. So, what I'd say about things like particular sporting clubs, like big ones like Arsenal and Manchester United, they're really beacons in their communities. When you have match days, they're an important feeder to things like hospitality and tourism, because you have fans from all over the world, all over the country traveling to go and attend those games. So that means money for travel providers, money for accommodation providers, money for people running hospitality venues and so on. They also have normally a corporate social responsibility program. So that's benefits for the community. So education programs, volunteering programs for both the youth and sometimes the elderly, the disabled. And normally they'd have some sort of charitable range of organizations that they would support as well. So there's very, very good reasons to be passionate about a sports club. Right, they're very, very tangible benefits. It's not just about having a good day out. They really can be beacons of the community. Of course, it's not every single sports club that is like that, but there are quite a few that's like that. John, are you hearing us?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah, I
We
hear
can
you
hear you
okay.
now,
So I don't
yes.
know if you wanted to pick up on that because you are more heavily invested in football.
Yeah. So if we're considering the kind of the cultural impacts and how it is experienced in the UK and Ireland, I'm based in Northern Ireland. We have our own interesting dilemmas, and football, though, kind of is just something that we all share, really. And I'm a coach. My kids both play. My weeks and weekends are taken up with the sport. So it's one of those things that really is very embedded in culture here. And whether you're from the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, it's just a sport that definitely everyone is involved in.
Yes, and these clubs are heavily rooted in their communities, as Dr. Ferdinand was saying. Dr. Williams, Nigel, would you like to make a comment as we move forward?
I'm not such a big sports fan, but what I would add to that is that they're also international brands. So, for example, my brother's an Arsenal fan. He lives in Trinidad. They've extended their reach beyond national boundaries to have international impact.
Yes. Oh, yeah, because English football is a big thing here, in addition to our local and regional sports. So, in national contests such as the England versus Italy match in the European final, is the identity question. You have community identity with the clubs. Is the national identity question a very, very big issue? I mean, all of us know when you have international sports, you stand up for your team, you stand up for your country, etc. Is this a big issue, and do passions rage in these sports?
I mean, I think that passions are certainly present and there. Whether that's in the context of, I mean, I suppose event experiences at their very heart are about igniting passions. Whether that's football or whether that's carnival or whatever type of experiences, they're triggering something in people. Hence why they're attracted to them. There's no doubt that football around the world, is definitely one that exhibits significant passions amongst the populaces and fans in all of those countries. I mean, and in good ways and in bad ways, absolutely. It's a real mix of outcomes there. But so I think that obviously national pride is always going to be on display on these occasions, good and bad. And that's equally across in social media, where obviously our study was focused.
Yes, I read your article, very, very interesting and exciting to read. And you said that leading up to the match, there was a certain feeling in England about the British team and how it was likely to do, and a lot of hope. And when the match was lost, things changed, and social media was what you looked at, more particularly Twitter, to determine the change in feelings. Can you talk about that? Who would like to speak about that?
I don't mind leading on that one, if you, Nicole. So we followed the conversations on social media to see how they would evolve over time. Now, before, as you rightfully said, the discussions based on the data were quite positive. There was a lot of positive framing of migration, because most of the team were either the children or the grandchildren of migrants. And of course, there were hopes expressed for a win, because it's been a long time since the UK has been in the final of any major football event. So during the match, of course, the conversations were pretty much the same. Now, post-match, this is where the story changes a bit. Now, the actions, the people who were sending comments, abusive comments and stuff, they were very few in number. But unfortunately, due to the nature of social media, these comments got amplified, and the story changed from a very positive one to one in which which even the Prime Minister was required to condemn the actions of a few.
Yes. Okay. Let's see if we can play a couple of clips from that game, and could we do that? Thank you, darling. The victory. And that is when the tables turned, and that's when the nature of the discussion changed. I imagine people were just disappointed and angry, and you had, of course, many of the racial slurs and so on coming out. Nigel, you said that it was just a minority, really, but of course, those kinds of things are very explosive. And we do have the statements by politicians, the Prime Minister got involved and so on. Well, let me ask you a question having to do with the nature of your research work, really, which is about the ethical issues in social media. What are some of the ethical issues that are emerging in social media now that for you are very challenging?
Social media platforms, and what's their role and responsibility in society? Because are they public spaces or are they not? Is there free speech on social media, or are they private curated spaces that you get permission to enter? Because that debate lies at the heart of what can be done and not be done. If they're free speech spaces, then certainly you can't censor what people say on social media. But if they are publicly traded platforms, which most of them are, with the exception, I think, of a few open source ones, the platform owner has a certain amount of responsibility. And the other issue was where responsibility is contextual, because there are communities of interest. So you might have a global community who's interested in football, but they're communities of place where people live in specific locations. So the issues around sport in Trinidad are not the issues around sport in England or in Scotland or in Northern Ireland. So there will always be that tension between global communities weighing in and saying this is what should be done, and local communities saying this is what's best for us. And you see that tension expressing itself in social media being banned in particular locations. Myanmar and others may shut it down around election time, simply because from their point of view, the discussions that are happening there are harmful, so they won't get to continue. While the international community might weigh in and say, well, you shouldn't shut this down.
But the ubiquity and connectivity of social media, though, those things make what you say and do and what happens to the viewer on social media, it makes it very significant and impactful. I mean, so for instance, police violence in somewhere in the United States, whether it's in Minnesota or whether it's in a southern state in the United States, can have an impact throughout the world. And we have seen that on the Black Lives Matter issue that crossed boundaries, and you had big statements of people coming into the street, for instance, in London, where it did not happen. So what does the challenge between what you might say, Nigel, which is local, and any one of you can answer this, that's to say the local concerns and the fact that this is so ubiquitous, so connected all over the world and can have impact anywhere and can trigger feelings about things everywhere. What does that say about the issue of ethical responsibility and the need for mediation and the challenge of free speech in that context?
So I don't mind leading off, and John, do you mind taking off after that one? So these are complex questions without any certain answers. But what we have to say is that the platforms have already drawn lines in the sand as to what they consider permissible or not permissible. So if they were not moderated, if there was no intervention on behalf of the platforms, on behalf of individuals by the platforms, we would say, well, okay, it's a free speech issue. But we've seen that they have intervened in the past when there's content that they find objectionable. So the recent debates about coronavirus, they have weighed in on that. Certain political content they have banned from the platform. Certain entities have been banned because of their behavior on the platform. So I guess the argument is not whether or not they should intervene. It'll be, I guess, in terms of the nature and the extent to which they intervene. So that's one issue. The other one is that social media in its ubiquitous state is new to all of us. This ubiquitous perspective on social media is probably 10 or 15 years old at best. So we are still negotiating how to work in this space and how social media will work for us as a society. And there's the collective global society, but there are individual community and country societies where those boundaries need to be negotiated. And on that, I will hand you over to John.
Yeah, I mean, it leads to a lovely...
Let me say welcome. I didn't get a chance because of you got on late. I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us on Brighter Morning with Bhoe. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me too. Yeah, so just to add to Nigel's point there, about this new sort of negotiated space, really. I mean, obviously, if we look at the time span of the arrival of the internet, more generally compared to most communication things back to the printing press, we're literally in seconds here with this thing. So, if you imagine like the internet as an analogy, as a place to drive a new car, we don't have sort of learner tests. We don't have, a highway code per se. there's no real agreed parameters beyond if you've got a vehicle, you can go on the road. So we need to develop digital citizenship, really. We need to develop more responsibility. We need to educate and engage on that.
That's an important concept, though. I'll come back to it again, that concept of digital citizenship. I want to say that all the problems that you are wrestling with here, although what we are talking about specifically is an article that you wrote about the game between England and Italy, we have the same problems here on social media. You have the problems of extreme voices, of extreme interventions, of raging insults of people to one another, and the challenge of managing that in a small multi-ethnic society that is politically charged and politically partisan in nature has become an issue here in Trinidad and Tobago. It doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while it flares up and it presents some challenges for us. But Nicole, let me ask you a question, and it follows up from what Nigel and John have been discussing. Is social media a mediated space, or is it totally unmediated?
Is mediated, obviously, because as Nigel pointed out, there are times that they do step in. So, for example, a simple example you could see is with Twitter. Before you retweet an article, they'll ask you, have you read this article? They're also warning you about whether you really want to share that content or not. And of course, they intervene in certain, situations where they feel they need to. So, like, for example, around spreading misinformation about the coronavirus. Obviously, that's lives on the line. They intervened there. And I mean, before the US election, they chose to stop a story about Hunter Biden. Subsequently, they got a lot of backlash about that. But they chose at that point in time to just stop the circulation of a story. So there is mediation. I think what we are saying is that, as John said, people are kind of immature with social media use. I mean, there are a number of education programs that kind of working now to kind of educate people. So I just talk about two that we have in the UK. So you have BT, so British Telecom, they have their Hope United program, which is about beating hate online. And then you have a BBC and Sky Sports collaboration, which is meant to tackle online hate. I mean, they do it not so broadly educationally, but by asking viewers if they see anything using their hashtags or their accounts to report it to them, and they would have it taken down. So there is stuff going on, but this kind of stuff is going to take a while to kind of permeate through the population. I mean, I had this discussion with John before, so maybe there will be a time when they will not need to mediate as they are now, because people will be more mature with their social media use. But as John said, we kind of in a kind of open space here, and people don't really seem to understand what their consequences of their actions is. Like, for example, when you see online abuse online, you feel you need to comment on it and call it out. A lot of people don't understand when you do that, you're giving a troll what they want. You're actually spreading the very message that you actually want to stop.
Yeah, and
I think there is a role for social media platforms to kind of educate people and put warnings, or maybe they might want to intervene even more. So, like, for example, they know very well, I mean, BT did a research about this. They know very well what happens after a major sporting event. They know the pattern already, that abuse increases.
Okay, so that is something that is documented. That is to say that people become very abusive depending on the results of a match. And that is well known, so it's predictable. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's
That was
predictable.
actually one of the findings. in our study, wasn't it? The aspect of the domestic violence issue because of the end of a termination of a match that came to the fore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's studies showing the extent, yes.
But let me but how does I want to explore, I want to come back to this issue of digital citizenship, but just for a minute. How do you, I mean, in the case, let's say, of President Trump, Facebook basically banned President Trump, and they continued the ban after he ceased to be president. And, I mean, there are people who take the view that, I mean, they understand the thinking and they understand why, but it really does raise flags about free speech and the management of free speech. How do you respond to that kind of argument?
I think free speech has never gone on without consequences.
Yes. Okay.
So if you are operating in a shared space, not necessarily a public space, because Facebook is a shared space, it's not a public space.
Yes.
It's the same with Twitter, Snapchat, or Instagram, anything you want to think of. There should be norms that have been evolved and that are still being evolved as to how we interact in a shared space. Those are still being negotiated. Until that happens, you would have to put in some guardrails to ensure that we could continue to share this space going forward. It is not that free speech in itself is banned. There are platforms that have put themselves forward as bastions of free speech, and they're not popular.
Yes.
Because part of the, Bhoe, before you go on, is that you're assuming that these free speech discussions are in good faith.
Yes.
Many of them are not. Some of them are deliberate attempts to draw attention and to provoke an issue. So it's not the case that this person genuinely wants to know. No, this person wants to hear people complain and scream and condemn them, because that gets attention, that drives their mentions.
But how do we agree on the guardrails?
Well, we don't necessarily. I think they will have to be negotiated in this trial and error. So for example, building from our article, we've got a data set showing before, during, and after how this firestorm has emerged.
Yes.
Twitter will have an archive from inception, I think 2004, on all these online firestorms. They will know the content of the discussions that will happen. They will know the type of individuals that get targeted. They will even know the rate at which retweets and so on will happen. So there could be, they can work on their own past data to determine, well, okay, let's come up with some guidelines or rationales as to when we want to intervene and when we wouldn't. So for example, if you're tweeting banana emojis at particular footballers after a match, you're probably not sending them a recipe for banana bread.
Okay, very good. But could I, Nicole, I wonder if I could ask you this. What does the social media firestorm created after the match say about the mood of British society at this time?
Well, the thing about about what happened afterwards, some people actually took it as a positive. I'll explain why. Because they saw the degree of condemnation for the racist tweets and racist messages. They saw the degree of condemnation. They saw that it actually prompted the authority to act quickly. So there were few arrests made, tweets were taken down and so on. So some people actually chose to read it as a positive, that as a society we condemn this type of behavior that was acted out by, just a few people. So that some people chose to take it as a positive, that, it's showing some sort of development, because from the abuse, there was the outpouring of support for the players. So even like in the offline world, one of the players, the black players, his mural was defaced. and somebody went, off their own, in their own free time, they went and they cleaned it up and they restored it. So in a way, it's kind of a signal to some people that we are quite serious about getting rid of this type of behavior. I mean, John Newton looked at this more closely. For other people, it was kind of a disturbing signal of some, out of place elements arising in the society. So I want to talk about this a bit.
Yes, okay. Yes, we saw. Yeah, this is one of the consequences.
Yeah, so you see there was this outpouring.
Yes, and I think it's very significant there that the child actually went there and put up a British flag next to the thing, which basically called for an end to racism. And here you have one of the members of the upper house making a statement about it.
Yeah, they're stating there that that Priti Patel and the Prime Minister obviously can't kind of shirk the responsibility really for maybe the explosion around this topic. So there is that relationship there that's being discussed. I mean, I think you can't discount the fact that Margaret Rashford has become an icon of hope, really, if we're honest, in terms of he has called out and developed opportunities for children who have no school or free school meals. He has championed that cause. It has been social media that has allowed that to grow and scale to the stage that it has. So we have this dichotomy, really, where really incredible, intense good can be done by individuals to call out government at one side. On the other side, what comes with that freedom is obviously an escalation of these more troll type people who just get attention and sell their stuff. Really,
use it as a platform for self-exposure. Let me get to this business of digital citizenship, John. Could you explore that a little bit for me? Explain to me what you mean and what are the parameters or contexts within which you see that evolving.
Well, at the moment, I'm sort of doing a separate article looking at sort of digital transformation in the context of Northern Ireland, really, and a post-pandemic and post-Brexit scenario, obviously, and part of that is to try and get the conversation that's in the community, that's on social media, into a more balanced and more debate style. And there are platforms out there that we see in places like Barcelona and other regions where there are challenges that actually engage citizens in those debates more holistically than ever Twitter or Facebook or any of these platforms can. So there are tools out there for citizens to engage digitally. The challenge is that just as a conversation as we walk up a street or we shout across the road to somebody, social media allows that to grow exponentially and internationally. So how do we really get people at all ages, because this is just, it's not isolated to one age group or one specific, to develop, to understand the impacts that they have with what they say, to have some sort of sense of ownership of that, but also how they respond, because if communication is really, it's two parts listening and one part talking, and the listening is the important bit. I think how we listen, social listening, how we develop those skills, how do we do that from school level on? How do we do that in different platforms? How do we organize, individuals, groups, communities to address this right from school all the way through? Because look, I have children myself. They're on platforms. The technology's arriving quicker than we're ready for it. So we need to come up with some sort of a strategic approach, and I think that the digital citizenship, looking at people's well-being from using these platforms, either too much or in certain ways where they're maybe getting angered and involved, and for those on the extremes, even groomed for really bad outcomes. But I think. How we arrive at that, Bhoe, is still to be negotiated.
Okay. So it's a negotiating environment that we are in here to try to set up the guardrails and try to set up the parameters for continuing discussion. John, would you like to say a final word before you go? We're going to have to wrap up now because the news comes up in a couple of minutes.
Just to say, it's a wonderful piece of research to work on with two fantastic researchers. I've had the pleasure to work with in the responsible AI space. We have our network called the Responsible Use of AI in events and recreation and events. And Nicole and Nigel have been driving that really with a lot of great data and insights, and it's lovely to get a chance to share that more recent research with you, Bhoe. Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you for being on the program. It's great to see the collaboration that is taking place across universities and across geographical boundaries as well. Nigel, would you like to say something before you leave? I just want to say that Nigel is a Trinidadian. And yep. I know that he was trained at Cambridge, is that correct?
Yeah,
and is now at the University of Portsmouth as a reader. So you want to say something to that?
Well, I'll just invite people to check out the article so you could take a look at Euro 2020, could Twitter stop racist abuse before it happens? And this conversation, responsible AI, is embedded in a larger discussion and debate I'm having responsible management. So I lead the Responsible Project Management Initiative. You'll see that poster behind me. And we are looking at the nature of corporate responsibility, individual responsibility, and even community responsibility, and how those things are expressed and enacted. So responsible AI is certainly a part of it because it's seen as a transforming technology like electricity. So we can't just think of it as a tool to be used because we're the persons creating it and we're the persons using it.
Okay. And Nicole, would you say a final word before you go? You are a Trini also, so I want to let people know that. And you are now at Oxford Brookes in the business school, focused on events management. You want to say a final word before you go?
What I want to say here, if you have other academics viewing the program, is we need to look at how we deliver content around social media on our programs at university. I mean, right now at Oxford Brookes, the ethical question is not really something that is heavily explored. We explore social media as a tool for business, and it's about how can the students use this tool. There's not a deeper introspection yet about why, is it appropriate? How can it be used as a force for good? The deeper ethical questions and debate, that's something that really needs to inform teaching at university. So that's something I really would want to endorse. And it's something, of course, at Oxford Brookes we would be looking to get into.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. John Bustard from University of Ulster, Nigel Williams from University of Portsmouth, and Nicole Ferdinand, Oxford Brookes University. We thank you very much for being our guest this morning, for taking the time to spend with us and to, first of all, talk about your article, and secondly, to talk about these important issues having to do with ethical conduct and behavior on social media. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that discussion. And we move on now to the news. This is Brighter Morning with Bhoe. I am Bhoe Tiwari, and we move on now to the news with Chanel Al-Suran. Thank you.